Welcome to this DaVinci Resolve Fusion node breakdown. Today's node is the paint node part 2. So let's go ahead and jump into Fusion, and I'm going to add a paint node. And before I get into doing all this stuff over here today, I want to clarify some things that I may have missed or confused people on yesterday when we went over all the actual brush or paint strokes up here. So first thing I want to go over is with this group. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to create a bunch of little strokes here. And if we go to our select button, we can select them all and then we can group them all. And if you notice, it put our little center thing here in the center, our little group control button here in the center. Now we can move this if we hold the control button. We can just drag this to wherever we want. And now it's centered on our little strokes, or I can hit control and drag it on a stroke if I want. And now it's centered on that stroke. So let's go ahead and refresh this. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the little roto assist here, this roto button. So if I select this roto button, underneath we have a distance 8 menu or a distance 8 selection. And what this is this is for us to change the distance of those pixel selections. And right now by default it's set to 8, but I can change it to 4 if I want. So now if I come in here and click, it's going to search within 4 pixels. If I need to change it again, I can go up here and say 12 if I want. So now it's going to search within 12 pixels. So now we've got our little line. So let's refresh this. And one other thing I wanted to talk about was this multi-tool and this clone tool, because this does confuse some people sometimes. So if I select my, say, clone tool, and we go in here and we want to fix this light or something, hit Alt, I can select, and then I can paint. So let's say I'm all done with that little tool, and then I need to go back and I need to select my other multi-tool to make more brush strokes. And if I go, it's stuck on this clone tool. All you have to do is go over to this apply controls and change your apply mode back to the regular brush here, or the regular color brush. And now I can paint. So that is a little glitchy. It'll stick on that clone tool when you jump back over to multi-tool. So let's go ahead and refresh our node. And the last thing I may have confused people on is when I was talking about this little draw append right here. You don't have to have an existing polyline to use this draw append. This draw append just allows you to draw. So if I just select this, I can just click and freehand draw whatever I want. So that's what that tool does. So let's go ahead and refresh, and we're going to jump into our little inspector controls over here. So as I said, our little multi-tool and our clone tool, we cannot change anything once we create it. So if we're going to use this brush tool, we need to make our changes before we start using this brush. And to show this better, I'm going to skip over here to the stroke button so we can see what this brush stuff does. So I'm going to go ahead and just make a stroke, and we'll zoom in here. And these settings over here for these brush controls and your apply controls are the same for your multi-stroke and your clone multi-stroke. First off, we got our brush shape, and by default is set to our little soft brush here. And under that, we have the ability to change the size, and we need to select our brush stroke first. We can change the size, and we can change the softness. If we have it set to hard, we can just change the size. We can also have a image here for our little brush strokes. And what's going to control our image is what we have assigned to these little image sources. So if I go to my brush image source, I can select what brush I'm using. So if I want to use the bomb, I can change it to the bomb. I can change the size, or I can have a little snowflake, change the size. So whatever brushes you have loaded on your system are what's going to show up here. If we select clip under our image source, we're going to get a source file that we can browse for. So if I select browse, you can go anywhere and pick whatever clip you want to use, and it could be a image clip, it could be a movie clip, or whatever you select is going to turn it into a brush, and you can change the size. And if I select tool under image source, we're going to get this open tool, and this is where we can just drag whatever we want to use as a brush into this little section. So if I have some, I don't know, random video here, I can select my paint node, and I can drag that media in there. So now we've got that media input. And if it's a video, it'll play the video back as well. And then we have pixels as a brush shape, and underneath we have tablet settings, which are vary size and vary opacity. And these are actual tablet settings. So if you're using a pen, you can change these menu systems to get your pen to work the way you want. And I know even under here it says tablet settings, but this doesn't necessarily change with your pen. It's just going to have these two sizes, whether you're using a mouse or a pen. But for pixel, if we zoom in super close, you can see it's just a single pixel on that line. And then finally, we have our little square here, and it just creates squares, and all we can do is change the size of those squares. So let's refresh our node. And if we go to multi-stroke and we go to our little brush controls, you can see it's all the same. Same with our clone tool, our brush controls are all the same. And if we select polyline, and let's make sure we're on color here, and I create a little polyline, all these brush strokes work the same as they do in the other settings. So let's delete that. Now under our circle, if I create a circle here, if I select our circle, we can change our little center radius here. Here we can change the radius of our overall circle. Same with square. If I create a square, we have the ability to change our center radius. Let me go ahead and select that. We can change our center radius. We can change the width. We can change the height. And unchecking and checking will just allow us to draw on the sub pixel level. So let's delete our square. Now for our copy shapes, all of our little menu systems over here are pretty much the same. So if I create a little copy circle here, you can see we've got our circle, and we can move the copy location with that. And to see my original source location, if you remember from yesterday, we need to select this show source. And right here, if I change this center, it's changing the location of where we're placing our source media. And if we need to change our source, we need to use this source X and Y. And down here under fill type, we can either use image, which is going to use the image that's within our source, or we can select fill, and it's just going to give us a fill color. And if I need to change that fill color, I can go down here and change the fill color. And to fix this little area, since I changed it, we just need to go back to stamp, because that's what it's doing. It's applying a stamp to our little fill area from our source area. And again, we've got our little width and height here that we can change. And like I said, the only difference between the copy polyline is we lose that width and height. But on our circle and our square, we've got that. It's the same. And here we can change the angle. We can change the size. We can change our softness. Here we can change our opacity. Additionally, we can flip it horizontally and flip it vertically. So let's refresh our node here. Under our fill selection here, if I go ahead and select something, you can see it filled our area. And if I select that fill area, you can see it gave us a center right here. So I can change our center, move our center around. We can change the color space from RGB to HLS, YUV, and lab color. And under our channel, we can select if we want to affect a specific channel. And it's going to depend on what color mode we have selected. Under our range mode is just going to increase or decrease the range of our selection. And our soft edge is just going to add a soft edge on our selection. So let's refresh this, and to show this group mode, let's go ahead and make some strokes here. So we've got our little group. And I can select all these, group them. And once I go to the group menu here, you can see we get a center, so we can change that center. And remember, we can hold Control and move our actual pivot location. And then we can affect the center. We can change the angle. We can change the size. And if I select this Show Subgroup Controls, it's going to show the controls for our actual strokes. But we can't change them because remember, this is multi-stroke. If these were actual strokes that we had that we can alter, we would be able to change them. And right here, I can select to reset our center. If I say move this, select Reset Center, it's going to bring it back to its correct location. And if I want to ungroup all those strokes, I can just select Ungroup, and we no longer have a group. They're all individual strokes. So let's refresh our node. And I'm going to select our little stroke button here. Under our apply controls, this is where we can change our apply mode. So let me go ahead and draw something here. Going across. And right now it's just set to color. And under a color, we can select what actual channels we're pushing through. Additionally, we can change the color. Oops, let me go ahead and select our stroke. We can change our color. Additionally, we can change it independently on the R, G, and B channel. We can change our alpha. And if you remember right, if I look at this, if I bring our alpha down, it's actually applying that to our alpha channel, whereas our opacity is not. So if I look back here, our opacity is just changing our opacity, and our alpha channel is actually affecting our alpha channel. Our next option right here is to clone. And once I make a brush stroke, I'm not going to be able to select this clone and affect it correctly. So let's actually go ahead and select our stroke. We're going to delete it. To be able to use this clone correctly, we want to select it before we make a brush stroke. And to be able to use this, all we have to do is hit our Alt key. So if we want to take care of these lights, I can hit my Alt key, go over and clone that area. So now that little light's gone. And if I select our stroke, we can change the opacity. Additionally, we can select overlay. That way, what we're seeing is we're seeing an overlay of our actual selection from our stroke. We can select to view our still source. And since our still source is the same, we're really not going to see anything. And additionally, we can select to snap our offset. For timing offset, this is going to change the timing of what we selected. So when we selected it, we were at frame 0, so it's just going to follow our exact frames right there. But if I was to offset our time, so say if I went to 10, it's actually pulling the image from frame 10 instead of 0. And our offset is our actual offset location that we selected in the beginning. Additionally, we can change the size of that selection. We can change the angle of that selection. Under our source tool, we can bring in different sources or use different sources to clone. So let's go ahead and fit this, and I'm going to double up our little selection here, and we'll bring our paint node over here. Let's say I've got this media right here and I want to pull this color to replace over there. So even though I wouldn't, the color's off, but so I could bring our media into our source, and over here I can select what I want to clone over here. So I can hit Alt right here, and that's what I'm going to clone right here. So now if I play, you can see it's playing both and using this image to clone in behind. So let's go ahead and delete that. Refit and refresh our node. Additionally, we can use emboss to emboss an image. So let's go into brush controls. Let's crank the size, and if I create a stroke, you can see it's embossing that area. I can also select erase, but to be able to use the erase tool, we need some regular strokes here. So let's create some strokes. And if I go over here and use my erase tool, you can see we're erasing those strokes. Now for this merge node, this is a little confusing. What the merge brush or the merge apply control does is it merges our actual strokes into the image. So instead of having a stroke kind of like on top, it merges it in with the image. And let's go ahead and make this a big stroke. So if I create a stroke and I go to my settings after I select it, of course, if we change this to subtractive to additive, you can see it's merging our brush strokes in with our image. And it acts kind of the same way as our color control, but the only thing we're missing is our color ability. So this is a good thing to use if we're using images. So for example, if I delete this, let's select a clip here, and I'm going to bring in my little cover, and let's change the size. So if I place it there, you can see it looks a little different than if I was to select this brush and place my image. So this mode a lot of times is used to place this type of image if we're using it as decals or signs. So if we had a wall and we were placing this, we could use this merge mode, and it just works better than the color mode for images. So let's refresh. So then we have our smear brush. So I can change that size and we can smear stuff on our footage. And then if I select our little smear brushes here, we can change the strength of our smear. And we can change how our images affect on the borders. So if we accidentally smeared our borders out, whether it's going to be black edges or whether we're going to duplicate those edges. So let's refresh, select our little stroke here. And for our stamp, it is exactly that. It's a stamp. So if I come in here and change the controls, and I've got this little thing, you can see it's creating this weird stamp here. And what happens with the stamp is it's completely ignoring like any alpha channels or any transparency. So if I look at our alpha, you can see it just stamp that out with the brush we had selected. So this is another good tool to use if we're using, say, our image. I can go to a clip, I can browse for a little stamp here, select our stamp, and let's change the size. And if I stamp it out, you can see we've got that there, but there are no additional controls for this stamp. So let's refresh that. And then we have this wire removal. So let's pretend this is our little wire here, and we wanted to remove this. I could just create a little polyline, and it's going to use the pixels around it to try to remove that wire. So if I look, you can see our little area is gone, like our wire. In our blend type, we can use crossfade or edge blend, and it just depends on the wire you're trying to remove, what mode you're going to use. Additionally, we can change the angle of how it's pulling those pixels. We can change the distance of how far it's pulling those pixels away. And if we change the bias, it's going to lend a little bias to the pixels surrounding our little selection. For our noise right here, if your line created a super clean look, and for this one it really didn't, but if you have a noticeable clean look with noise around it, this noise button will add some noise to that removal. This will change the noise threshold. And then this is the overall opacity of that wire removal. And down here for our image borders, if it's cutting out, we can duplicate, or we can just have black edges. Now under our stroke controls, it's going to be different depending on what brush or what stroke apply mode we're selecting. So if I select multi, you can see we get stroke duration right here. So if we refresh our node, let's go out. If you remember right, if I select this by default, if I create a stroke here and push play, it only lasted 1 frame. But if I wanted my stroke to last longer, I can change my stroke duration. So if I wanted to last 30 frames and I created a stroke, it's going to last 30 frames and then disappear. And the same goes with our little clone. We get this stroke duration right here. But for the rest of our little tools up here, our stroke controls change. We lose that duration up top, and our duration is controlled within our stroke animation section. So let's refresh this. Let's create a stroke. And let's go to our stroke controls. So by default, it's set to all frames. So our stroke is going to last the entire timeline. If I change it to limited duration, it's only going to last as long as I tell it. So right now, just 1 frame. And if I change that to 30 frames, you can see we got a keyframe sitting at 30. So it's going to last and then disappear at 30. So let's refresh. Let's create a new little stroke here. And we're going to write all the way across. And let's go ahead and select our stroke. And let's go to our stroke controls. And for our duration, let's go ahead and change this to 190. And our other option here is right on. So if I select right on, what it's going to do is going to right on our strokes start from 0, and it's going to create keyframes until our stroke is ended. So if I back up and I push play, you can see that's writing on. And I also have the ability to change where that's happening. But just remember, whenever you change this little stroke thing, it's going to create a new keyframe. So if I go to the very end and change it, if I go back and play my full timeline, you can see it's creating keyframes to write on and write off, depending on how I change the start and end time of my little write on. And then our other option is write off. So I can create a write off. So it's going to be kind of backwards. And our keyframes are going to be a little strange because we added keyframes at the end. But it's the same thing. We can change our write off start and our write off end. And then we have write on then off. So we have a write on and then off, and it's going to look a little odd because we created extra keyframes. But again, with a write on, we can change our write on start and our write on end. And then for our final little stroke animation here, we have trail. So it's going to create a trail. And let me go ahead and delete this and create a new stroke. So I'm going to create a stroke, select it. If I go to our stroke controls, select trail. Now if I push play, by default, it's going to do that. So what it's doing is it's just trailing that line across. And we can change the start and end of our right on to make it a longer trail. If we want to increase the size of our little line there, oops, I didn't mean to do that. If we want to increase the size of our little line here, we can just change our duration. So now if I go back, it's a longer line based off the duration of our line that we're telling it to play back. Additionally, under here for all these options, we can change our center. We can change the angle. We can change our sizing. And we can change our spacing of those individual strokes. So if I zoom in here and we look at our spacing, you can see our spacing is getting wider or thinner. So let's go ahead and refresh our node, and I'm going to create a new stroke. Let's go back to our stroke controls. Now, remember yesterday I mentioned the fact that we don't have any animation set to this. You know, even though we can keyframe the different stuff like the trail and the right on, right off, we really don't have any keyframes for this until we select Make Editable. And then once we select Make Editable, it's going to create individual little keyframes for all that stuff. If I right click and I select Animate, now we've got the ability to animate on our little spline editor here. So now any animations or any changes we do, we can use our spline editor to edit them. So let's refresh. And if I select our little multi-tool here and I create it, all we can do here is change our center location and our angle and our sizing. But remember, we can't edit these multi-strokes and clone multi-strokes. That's why it's not changing. So this is something you'd want to do before you actually created your brush stroke. And the same goes with your clone tool. You only have center, angle, sizing, and spacing, non-editable, so you have to do it before. Your stroke and your polyline have all the same stroke controls. And for your little circle, your square, your copy polyline, copy circle, and copy square, and your fill have no stroke controls. So that is part 2 of our little paint node here. I know a lot of this is a lot of information kind of coming at you quick, but I'm trying not to make these too long. So tomorrow we will jump in here and we'll actually use this paint node to correct some of this stuff we would normally correct when we're doing production. So I will see you in the next node breakdown.